Good Tuesday afternoon, everybody. Rob O'Connor here from Rob Vino Sports, along with Rob Vino himself, and today we are going to discuss the 2017 NCAA tournament. We will get into everything from overrated seeds, underrated seeds, potential first, second round upsets. We'll even talk a little NIT action, and to do all of that, I need to bring none other than the founder of RobVinoSports.com, Rob Vino, into the program. Rob, how are you this afternoon?
Hey, I'm doing great today, Rob. You and I, both very close geographically, we're snowed in today with this crazy storm that started overnight here, and in my case, southeastern Pennsylvania, and in your case, just over the line in New Jersey.
Absolutely. This weather would be the definition of March Madness, to say the least, and we've got a lot to cover today. So I guess let's just jump right into it with something that you had been featuring pretty heavily on the website for all of our visitors, and that is the Rob Vino rankings, if they used from a gambler's Vegas perspective, where everybody would be seated in. Some people might not have had a chance to look through that. So why don't you just point out a few of the teams that are overseeded and a few of the teams that are underseeded based on where you think things should have kind of lined up based on your rankings?
Yeah, and just for everybody listening to understand, obviously, and I've been keeping power ratings for some 20-plus years now, but they're a form of raw ranking or raw rating, not even a ranking, raw rating that, you develop a point spread from. So it gives me a gauge on where lines should open versus the odds makers, where they open them up, and then we can go ahead and counter punch from there. What we did at Rob Vino Sports was we didn't worry about, teams that have top 50 wins, teams RPI rankings, or any of that. Just took, and of course, following the guidelines for the tournament that, conference tournament winners are accepted into the 68-team field. What we did was we took the 68 best power ratings using those guidelines and put together the field. It really came out fairly close, Rob. I'll tell you, the only three teams, I believe, that missed that the power ratings thought should have been in. Number one was Syracuse, who, probably had a legitimate gripe. There's no doubt about it. But they did have a bunch of bad losses, so Syracuse didn't make it. Their power rating was rated high enough to be in. They did not get there. Secondly, we thought that TCU probably had a high enough rating to get in. They did not get in the tournament as well. So TCU was another team. And the third one was Indiana. So those three teams, power ratings considered good enough to get into the tourney. They did not. Teams that got in, that power ratings fell just shy, were Xavier and VCU. Those two teams, and Providence was the third. Those three teams did not make it power ratings-wise, but they did in the eyes of the committee. And it's interesting, Rob, I say all this, three that power ratings thought should be in and three that they thought should be out. The difference as far as numerical value is concerned, which is what power ratings are, is so minimal it's ridiculous. I mean, you're talking about one team having a neutral floor power rating of 53 and another having a neutral floor power rating of 52.5 and therefore not be good enough to get in. So we're splitting hairs. I think the committee did a, pretty good job with the teams they picked this year. We didn't hear an awful lot of complaining. I got to say, I was just going to say, this is one of the few years where I think that there are really no legitimate gripes. And I understand the Illinois State coach perspective of, I really don't have an opportunity to do what the committee wants me to do. And that's really a separate conversation from, did you really deserve to be in the tournament based on
all of these criteria, and you look at a team like Syracuse, who was supposedly one of the first one or two teams left out of the tournament. Don't lose to St. John's by 30 points, and you're probably in the tournament. I mean, it's kind of a situation where they control their own destiny, and they just didn't do enough work. So I don't think they have a legitimate argument because they had the chances, and despite some successes, primarily at home, they didn't do enough on the road. They didn't do enough out of conference, and therefore they're not in the tournament. So I thought that the committee overall did a good job.
And you can judge it, Rob, basically, like you said, off of the exterior noise after the field was selected. There was no noise, basically, from anybody. Minimal noise, like you say, from those two teams, Illinois State and Syracuse, but not like we're accustomed to, where analysts on television fight for 5 hours over a team that should be in. And none of that happened this season. So the 68 are in. How they were seeded, there are some, extreme differences, and I'll just tell you that everybody has hit on it right now. The first person I saw to hit on it on television was, of all people, Charles Barkley, an NBA analyst, who claimed that Wichita State was drastically underseeded, and he's so correct in that assessment as far as power ratings are concerned. Now, I'm talking about guys who bet games, who handicap games, odds makers who set lines to that group of people. Wichita State is a top 10 team in the nation, power rating-wise. To be seeded 10th, even if you're the top 10th seed, that means the committee thought there were 36 teams better than Wichita State, which is an absolute joke. There's no way there's 36 teams better than Wichita State. And now, listen, they could go out and they could lose in the first round. Things happen in the NCAA tournament, but the bottom line is that team was seeded extremely low, much lower than they should have been. I had them projected as a 2 seed. You can see it in the point spread, Rob, right away when you take a look at a 10 Wichita State playing a 7 Dayton. The 10 is supposed to be the underdog. In this case, the 10 is a 6.5, 7-point favorite, which is a strong number. So obviously, seeding-wise, it doesn't affect those of us who bet the games. We take the point spread for what it is, and we work from there. We mostly figured that Wichita State was going to be a favorite. What it affects is Wichita State. Instead of playing a lesser foe, you have to open with Dayton, a 7 seed, and then your reward if you win that game is facing number 2 Kentucky. So if Wichita State had been on the other end of the spectrum, been seeded maybe, even 4, you'd get a 13 in the first round, which is a little bit easier. It's not easy nowadays, but it's a little bit easier than facing Archie Miller and number 7 Dayton. So we'll see how it goes. Aside from that, I really don't have, anything. I don't get into complaining much. Like I say, we're here to deal with what's presented in front of us where point spreads and totals are concerned. But I do think that Wichita State certainly will enter this tournament with a chip on their shoulder, being cast as a 10 seed, which is pretty much ridiculous in my eyes.
What do you think of some of the tournament numbers? I mean, the ACC got the most with 9 teams. Percentage-wise, the Big East gets 70% of their conference into the tournament. The only 3 that missed weren't even close to being under consideration: Georgetown, St. John, and DePaul. What does that say about the strength of a Big East conference with the defending national champion, Villanova?
Yeah, I think that's interesting, Rob, because a couple of minutes ago when we went through the power ratings projections, 2 of the teams that I had mentioned that my power ratings thought should not be in come from that conference, right? Xavier and Providence. I thought, it's a shame what happened this season to Creighton and Xavier, right? Mo Watson Jr., the spark plug for Creighton, goes down a little bit earlier than Edmund Sumner did for Xavier, also their point guard, spark plug. But the teams reacted differently. Creighton never really fell off balance. They weren't the same team without Watson, but they never really fell off balance. Xavier went through a complete tailspin up until the last 3 games of the season without Sumner. And I just don't feel like Xavier, at this point in time, should be tournament bound. However, you're judged on your entire body of work, and it shows that the committee really didn't consider the Sumner injury as much as maybe they've considered some injuries in the past. We just taking this year, for example, we saw Chris Boucher for Oregon get hurt during the Pac-12 tournament. Oregon fell to a 3. They probably were good enough to be a 2. How the committee judges injuries, it's a little varied in the way they do it. You can see that there's no real strict protocol to how they should handle those. But I did think that Sumner meant much more to Xavier and enough to keep them out of the tournament. And also, like I say, Providence. Providence for a while, both of these teams straddled that line, Rob. That last 4 in, last 4 out that we see all the time from guys in the media who do this on a daily basis. We were keeping our own last 4 in, last 4 out, and every single game would affect where these teams got seeded. It was a crazy situation this year. But still, you know what? Those 2 teams, Xavier and Providence, are not – it's not like they totally don't deserve to be there. It's just a difference in season-ending numbers on my end and what the committee saw from those 2 teams overall this year.
Well, I think that there's obviously a lot of games out there. We're not going to have time to go through them individually, but let's start with this question. Any team that you see 10, obviously Wichita State, 11, 12, even lower, anybody you see that has a reasonable path to the Sweet 16, or is this really a year where there's just so much strength in the top 20 or so teams that these smaller, lesser powerful schools are not going to have the opportunity to make their presence felt in this tournament?
Yeah, and they can always make them felt for a round. But like you're asking here, can any of them legitimately find their way to the Sweet 16, which means you have to get through your Thursday-Saturday contest or your Friday-Sunday contest this upcoming weekend? I think, again, let's go back to Wichita State, Rob, because if they beat Dayton, they get presented with Kentucky. Kentucky's a team predicated on freshmen. Wichita State, a very, very well-schooled ball club, fundamentally sound. I think they could give Kentucky fits. I'm not saying, and that they'll win the game, but we're theoretically looking at teams that have the possibility to win a game. They're not going to be a large underdog to Kentucky when that point spread comes out. If that game should develop, that point spread is going to be very close, within 1.5, 2 points. Maybe Kentucky's only a 2-point favorite in that game. So that's how good Wichita State is. If they were to get by that, you look at the upper half of that bracket, and maybe they see UCLA, maybe they see Cincinnati. I guess the bottom line to this whole spiel is that Wichita State is more than capable of finding their way to the Sweet 16. I think longer shots, and if we're talking 10 down now, that's where I'm going with this. Maybe a 10 seed down. I think we'd make a good buddy of ours, Derek Davis, pretty happy with by saying Oklahoma State. I think Oklahoma State has a legit shot. That's a very good offensive ball club. Not all that interested in playing defense, but they'll get Michigan opening round. Michigan has become the flavor of the week off of and they and Duke. I shouldn't just exclude Duke, because Michigan and Duke both have drawn heavy praise and heavy respect in the lines here as we see them come out and move this week. So I think if they can get past Michigan, they can get into a tussle with Louisville. And Oklahoma State's gone through a rigorous Big 12 schedule this year. So when you're looking at teams that may be battle-tested, obviously ACC number 1, best conference in the land this year, but I think Big 12 was probably the second best conference in the land with a very, very difficult opponent each and every night. And when the worst team in your league is Texas, who, as Shaka Smart's team just happened to be very young this year, but they still played hard every night, then that's a really good league. So Oklahoma State battle-tested. They could be a long shot selection to make it to the Sweet 16, I think. Other than that,
I got one for you.
It would be difficult. Go ahead, buddy.
I like Rhode Island. I think that their path playing against two teams that are very good basketball teams but have both suffered injuries in Oregon and Creighton, it just sets up well for them in their little pod out in Sacramento to have a chance to jump into the Sweet 16. They're not going to be playing these teams at their absolute best, and I just think there's a chance for Rhode Island to make a little noise.
And it's interesting you bring up Rhode Island, Rob, because of the 32 first-round games that'll be played, now I'll skip the first four in. If we want to count the first four in, then there's 36 games being played here. Of those, there's only one game where the odds makers opening line and my power ratings opening lines had different favorites in the contest. That game is Rhode Island. Creighton came out as the favorite in this game, the 6 versus 11, but power ratings suggest Rhode Island is the better team. So I'd be all in with you. Hey, Danny Hurley's squad went through some injury problems early in the year, but now that E.C. Matthews and company are rolling, that's a very good basketball team. Let's not forget that heading into this college basketball season, Rhode Island was in quite a few people's top 25 preseason. That's how good Rhode Island, or at least how highly they were considered by experts inside college basketball. They thought Rhode Island was a top 25 team, most of them. So this is an undervalued team, an unknown team at this point in time. You don't see Rhode Island on television in most parts of this country. Lots of people don't know about them, but I'm right with you there. Obviously, my power ratings say they're better than their first-round opponent, Creighton, so it would not be a surprise to see them move 2 rounds. Very gritty defensively, very good offensively. They mowed right through that Atlantic 10 tournament. And, hey, they brought us home a big winner on Sunday, 20-star with Rhode Island over VCU, and that always works.
Rob, let's take a look at the 4 number 1 seeds. You've got UNC, you've got Gonzaga, you've got Villanova in there. Of those 1 seeds, which one, and Kansas, of course, sorry about that. Of those 4 1 seeds, typically all 4 don't necessarily make it to the Sweet 16. One of them might go down opening weekend. If there was one of the 4 that might go down, who do you think it's going to be?
Well, if we polled 100 people, 95 would probably say Gonzaga, right? Because I think there's still concerns, questions from a lot of people about the Gonzaga Bulldogs. I don't happen to share those same opinions. So, you know, the toughest road to get there may belong to Kansas because the second-round opponent would be the winner of Miami of Florida or Michigan State. I don't think even though Kansas is better personnel-wise than both of these teams, I don't think that you want to get involved with the Tom Izzo club at this time of year. And Miami of Florida, for what it's worth, I think they would be the more difficult matchup. Jim Laranaga's squad has tightened the screws on defense for about the last, I'll say 5 weeks now. They have been a tremendous defensive team. They don't mind slowing down the pace. They've got guys at the guard position that could give Frank Mason some fits. So maybe, it wouldn't be an expected thing for Kansas to lose, but maybe out of the 4 teams, they would have a more difficult second-round opponent. I don't see Gonzaga losing to South Dakota State or Northwestern Vanderbilt winner. I think Gonzaga can make their way through those 2 games. UNC again, Texas Southern, and then the winner of the Arkansas-Seton Hall game. If they play Arkansas, it would get into one of those, 88-80 contests, but UNC should come out on top there. I think Nova can find their way past the play-in game winner and whoever wins between Wisconsin and Virginia Tech. So I'm going to go with Kansas here, Rob. I don't expect it, but since we're, throwing out, theoreticals, maybe Kansas is the team that has the best opportunity to go down within the first two rounds.
I would tend to, and as a Villanova fan, I just think the matchup with Wisconsin concerns me a little bit. Wisconsin's going to make you play defense for 29 seconds, and Wisconsin is going to get back in the transition and make you work very hard for every offensive point that you're going to get. Villanova is not a deep basketball team this year. They're going 7 men, 7.5 men sometimes if they play Dylan Painter, and it's going to be a game where Villanova is going to really need to control the pace. You've seen them do it a lot in some games this year where, granted, they could put up 109 or 108 against St. John's, but then in that Seton Hall game, 57-55, I think Villanova can clearly beat Wisconsin and come out on top, but they're going to have to find a way to get some easy buckets and not have to work so hard for everything because Wisconsin is a team that will wear you down.
They certainly will. Let me ask you this. We'll reverse roles here. Let me ask you a question real quick. Should the opposite result occur, and should Virginia Tech and Buzz Williams beat Wisconsin, which I think is a distinct possibility, would you have the same fear that Villanova could lose to Virginia Tech as you might against Wisconsin?
No, I don't. I think that if Villanova, and again, Villanova doesn't care which of the two teams they play, to be quite frankly. I mean, Jay Wright's not going, let's root for Virginia Tech or, I want Wisconsin. But I just think at the end of the day, the brand of basketball that Wisconsin plays is probably a little more physical. It's going to be a little more draining on a team that just played 3 games in 3 days, and now they're going to be playing on just 1 day of rest. And for a team that's short on men, I mean, the best thing you can hope for is not that you ever want to see a school get embarrassed, but Villanova goes up 40 points early in the second half, and they're resting a lot of players and just getting them some time. But that's going to be Villanova's biggest issue this entire tournament is their depth. But in terms of Wisconsin or Virginia Tech, I think they'd have a much easier time with Virginia Tech than they would Wisconsin.
And just, for guys out there betting these games, maybe it's your first time getting involved in the NCAA tournament as far as betting contest is concerned. I don't make a lot of blanket statements because there aren't a lot to be made when you're betting games. It's so situational. It's not an exact science. If it was, there would be so many winners that we probably wouldn't be allowed to bet sports right now. But one thing that holds true each and every year is that the one seed always has a true advantage over the 8-9 team, and that being you get 4 days between the time your name is called and your first game, sometimes 5 days if you play on Friday. In the case of Nova, I think they play Thursday. And when you draw a 16 seed, the ones spend 0 time prepping for the 16 seed. They can roll out the balls for the most part. Even if they win the game by 2 points, they'll mostly win the game. They'll spend a couple of hours on film study of a 16 seed, but they get a full 6-7 days to prep for their second opponent, which in this case would be Wisconsin or Virginia Tech. I'm sure Jay Wright's bunch not worried too much about Mount St. Mary's, New Orleans. They're practicing right now for Wisconsin, Virginia Tech. One's gain a great advantage that way. Obviously, 8-9 has pulled upsets before, but just when you're handicapping these things, you know that preparation-wise, the ones have a huge advantage in that second-round game over the 8-9s. It may, point spread is always the great equalizer, and you can't just bet a one blindly. But still, preparation-wise, they're at an advantage. There's no doubt about it.
Well, Rob, there's a lot of games to be played. Give me 2 or 3 you're really looking forward to watching this weekend. I know I'll be looking forward to watching all of them, but we obviously have some we're looking forward to a little more than others. So in the first round, because, we really don't know who's going to win and get to the round of 32, so we'll just stick with the first round here. 2 or 3 that you think are going to be really fun to watch, really exciting, something you're looking forward to checking out.
Yeah, if we want to go for sheer excitement, Rob, I would go to a 5-12 matchup between Iowa State and Nevada. For those who don't know, Nevada's an excellent basketball team. Ran away with the Mountain West for the most part this year. By the end of the season, their separation, power rating-wise, from the rest of the league was significant. It's a team full of returnees that won the CBI tournament last year, so kind of a stepping stone last season into this season. Not a big basketball team where interior paint size is concerned, much like Iowa State, in the fact that they'll run a bunch of 6'3" to 6'8", 6'9" out there. Very skilled, as is Iowa State. We saw that this past weekend in the Big 12 tournament. I don't know that there's a team in the country that can shoot it the way Iowa State can on a nightly basis. They just shoot the basketball. They don't turn it over. Obviously, great point guard play on that team. And the matchups are really good here. I think Eric Musselman's Nevada team will come to play. If you're an Iowa State fan, you hope that the victory in the Big 12 tournament doesn't kind of linger with them. You hope that they get over that and get right back to business. But I think from a sheer excitement standpoint, that will be a real good game to watch. We know history. It tells us that each year there's a 12 out there that beats a 5. Nevada is extremely capable of defeating Iowa State should Iowa State shoot the ball, a little below what their season average would be. They're going to have to play their best game, but I do think Nevada's capable. Another one out there that we would probably want to watch from the sheer excitement standpoint, it won't move as fast, Rob, up and down the floor, but I think from a competitive standpoint, Vanderbilt Northwestern might be one of the hardest games to choose if you had no line whatsoever. For people that are in bracket contests, of which there are millions upon millions this week, Vandy and Northwestern is an excellent game between two teams that, it's hard to find any decisive advantage for either team in this game. So I think that one, from sheer competitiveness, not going to be as up and down as Nevada, Iowa State will be, obviously, but Northwestern Vanderbilt, I think, will be a game that will probably drag you right to that last final 5-6 seconds before we see who wins that game. So that would be another one on my mind. If you're looking for a long shot team that's going to be fun to watch, check out UNC Wilmington. They're going to play the Virginia in the opening round. It's a sheer clash of contrasting styles. UNC Wilmington, a team that was so young last year, a lot of freshmen, a lot of sophomores, now sophomore and junior oriented, but they came on last season very, very strong. This year, the class of the Colonial, Virginia wants to walk it. UNC Wilmington wants to get to 90. That will be a pretty fun game to watch, who can impose their will upon the other. So, out of all of them, I would say those three right off the top will be real exciting games to watch.
I think the couple that I'm looking forward to in the first round in terms of where there could be a deeper upset, I really don't see anybody 15 winning, 16 definitely not, but I don't see, once in a while I get a 15 beating 2. I don't see that out there this year, at least in my opinion. Maybe I'll be proven wrong, but I think if you go to a 14 or a 13 where you might get into it a little bit, I look at maybe West Virginia and Bucknell up in Buffalo. I mean, West Virginia's really been known to lay a few eggs throughout the year this season. I mean, if Bucknell can kind of get past the initial shock of seeing a press all the time and settle in and play their style of basketball, I mean, there could be a little bit of an upset maybe in that game. But I think there's going to be a lot of good games in the second round. It's like I said, we may have time to talk about that for a few minutes now if you want. It's kind of hard to hypothetical it out, but I think that if we try our best, I mean, I think some really good second-round games. I mean, you put Virginia against Florida. If those two were to play each other, or let's say another battle of the ACC versus Big Ten in Maryland and Florida State, or even a St. Mary versus in Arizona, does that maybe something that maybe St. Mary gets it to together and finally proves that they're not as bad as they looked in some of their losses to Gonzaga. I mean, there's a lot out there in the second round, so we have a few minutes here. What do you see at the next set that really, like, piques your interest a little bit? Again, it's hard to know if it's going to come to fruition or not.
Yeah, it's always tough to tell, but I think if you wind up with a matchup of old Southwest Conference opponents, Baylor and SMU, it's a definite possibility. I happen to be extremely high. Anybody who listens to the Sports Memo radio show knows that I'm extremely high on SMU, have been all season long. I still think they're a little bit underrated, Rob, but there's, you know, they would have to get by the Providence USC winner first. Baylor would have to get through New Mexico State, but if they do meet, they meet in Oklahoma, which isn't far from either campus, so you probably get a good showing as far as attendance goes for both of those teams. I think that could be obviously an interesting second-round matchup. Both teams, power rating-wise, semi-close. Baylor kind of struggled a little bit down the stretch, but let's not forget they played a couple of games without their starting point guard. They're now healthy. That would be a real good game. I also think second round, if you just go to the other side, I mentioned this before, but I'll mention it again. Louisville's a fantastic basketball team. There's no doubt about it. But should Oklahoma State get there, I just feel like with their skilled players, they could cause some trouble. Louisville's the better defensive team. Louisville is known to go into scoring droughts, however. They're not the best shooting team. And it's very possible that Brad Underwood's team, on a good shooting night, could take out Louisville. I think that would be a very, very exciting second-round game. You know, stuff that's been tossed around with like 12 to 16 seeds, Rob, the lower type seeds. There are real good teams out there. It's a shame for Vermont, in my estimation, that they drew Purdue in the first round, because Purdue probably just has too much size. But you had talked about Bucknell, so I don't have to. Vermont, another upper-class-laden team, potentially could get through into that second round, but I just think that Purdue's got too much size there, so you're looking at probably a Purdue, Iowa State, Nevada winner, which would be another fantastic basketball game. They're scattered all over the place. We've talked about a bunch of them, but if these matchups occur, it's going to be a lot of fun basketball the first 4 days. There always is. I think this year, because of the extended parity throughout college basketball, it could be even more exciting.
Well, Rob, I think we'd be doing our listeners a disservice if we did not point out a major change that is coming to the NIT tournament, which tips off tonight. I'll just run through exactly what that change is, and then I'll let you talk about it from the handicapping, gambling perspective of it. We know the NIT is a tournament that tends to kind of test run rule changes. They did a test run with the 30-second shot clock to try and increase some scoring, became an NCAA rule. Now they are test running a 20-minute half played in segments. The first 10 minutes after 14 fouls, a team that commits another defensive foul would award the offensive team 2 foul shots. There would be no 1-and-1. The catch is that after 10 minutes, the game clock would not stop and nothing would change, but the fouls committed by the team would reset to 0. You'd start over again. After another 4 fouls, the team would get 2 shots if they're fouled while playing offense, and the defensive team already has 4 fouls, 2 shots. This basically eliminates the 1-and-1 and could potentially cut down on the number of foul shots taken in a half. I mean, I'm sure you've done a lot more analysis than I have on it, but how do you see this affecting totals and over-unders? What do you see this kind of rule change bringing about?
You know, it's interesting, Rob. There were a bunch of odds makers interviewed on this particular subject about a week and a half ago, and to a man, they were in agreement that this was going to have some, I'm not going to say substantial, but some effect on game totals, where they were automatically going to take what should be a game total and pad it by 2 or 3 points and put it up as an opening line. And when you start to think about it, there's so many ways you can go with this, Rob. But I came from the opinion that I wasn't so sure that's the case, that it's going to make games higher scoring, which is...
I agree with you.
That's the opinion of odds makers. Now, we'll get into what's happening with these lines in a minute, but if you just think it through, first of all, you watch enough basketball, it's not all that often that a team commits 5 team fouls in the first 10 minutes of a game anyway. It does happen. I mean, there's teams like West Virginia out there that foul quite a bit. But for the most part, to get to 5, to say that everybody's going to get to 5 within 10 minutes, I just don't know that that's going to happen. And then to reset it and play your second 10 minutes and need another 5, to me, it seems like it will cut down on fouls. Now, I understand you're going to get 2 free throws and you can't blow the front end of a 1-and-1 in this particular setting anymore. So certainly there's a chance to at least score 1 point every time you go to the free throw line. But I think what's forgotten here, Rob, is the fact that in a normal game, the way the game is played right now, where when you get to 7 and you begin to shoot the 1-and-1, and when you get to 10, you shoot 2 free throws. Before you even get to 7, let's just say your first 6 fouls are shooting fouls. You're going to the free throw line anyway. It's not like the first 6 fouls are automatic inbounds play. You drive to the lane, first foul of the game, you get hacked, you're on the line shooting too. So I just have a hard time because so much of it, there's no way you can predict what kind of foul is going to be committed if you're following me here. And I just don't know how these guys could immediately add 3 to a total because they anticipate higher scoring games. Now, that being said, not only did odds makers add 3 to every NIT total, the betting markets have carried these totals to an insane place at this point in time. You look at game totals in the NIT tonight, and you see nothing but upward movement all morning long from bettors. Started yesterday, it's continued all morning long. If you look at tomorrow's NIT totals, those have already been pounded toward the over every single game. We see moves of 5-6 points in all of them, and it just seems like it's a good spot to step in and maybe take a chance with a couple of these unders. There's some defensive teams out there involved in this tournament that don't really score a lot of points, and these games are being pounded over just on the thought process that, oh my God, this new rule change is going to make every game go over. So we'll see how it works out. I'm probably going to take more of a wait and see approach, but I still think there's some avenues here where you can step in and play unders and probably cash yourself a couple of tickets, because these things are just not only padded, but the betting markets have taken the same opinion as odds makers that these games must go over.
Rob, I kind of think that, if anything, I think it might lower the scoring just a little bit. If you just take what you said and, okay, you commit 5 fouls in the first 10 minutes of a game, and the fifth one gives the guy 2 shots, regardless if it's a shooting foul or not. Chances are there's a 50-50 shot. That was going to be a shooting foul anyway. So what are you really doing and adding? And I look at the game from, let's say, the 8-minute mark under, where typically you'll get a team that gets 7, and then a minute later they get 8, and then 2 minutes later they get 9, and they're like, say, at 9 with 4 minutes to go, and you've had your 3 1-and-1s, and then you get 10, 11, and maybe if it's a really bad half for your team, 12, and you wind down and get 6 more foul shots. Now, at the 10-minute mark, you're going back to 0, and if you commit 4 fouls in the next, let's say, 6 minutes, now there's 4 minutes left in the half, you commit 2 more fouls, you're giving them 4 foul shots. I don't think there's going to be more foul shots taken. If anything, I think there's going to be less foul shots taken. And when you foul somebody that goes into a 1-and-1 situation, you don't know if you're fouling a 89% shooter or a 54% shooter, so they just automatically add 3 points. To me, it just made no sense at all. When I step back and look at it from a bigger picture of, pretend it's a full 20-minute running half, and what segment of the game would I expect to start to see some points on the foul line, it would be from the under 8 timeout on. Now from the under 8 timeout to really the under 4 timeout, I'm expecting less foul shots taken during that segment of the game than would be in a normal game with the regular rules.
Yeah, and I'll dissect it because, like you say, Rob, I've been through this the last 2-3 days trying to figure things out, but I'll dissect it even further. For guys out there who play first half and second half bets, I think this rule change really could lower the scoring in the first half. What happens in the second half of games, the last 90 seconds, the last 60 seconds, we see that flurry of fouls if a team is within 5, 6, 8 points, something like that, to try and get back in the game, trade 2 for 3, whatever. And we get a lot of points on the free throw line in the last, 90 seconds of a second half. In the first half, those fouls don't happen. People play for the last shot. College basketball isn't like the NBA where coaches go 2 for 1 and rush down the floor. So the last couple minutes of a first half are played extremely methodical or at the same pace that they've been played for the other portion of the half. Second half is a little bit different, but I think with this reset of the clock, of the foul situation at the 10-minute mark of the first half, and then you have to go through and gain 5 more fouls before a team gets to the free throw line automatically, that would probably lower scoring in the first half. Like you say, most teams do find their way to the 1-and-1 situation at some point in the first half. There's a chance here, Rob, that there could be no automatic free throw shot in a half. You get to 14 fouls before the 10-minute mark, it resets, you get to 4 in the second portion of the first half, and no free throws get shot by your opponent in that case either. So I think for those of you guys out there who play first and second halves, take an especially hard look at first half totals toward the under. NIT has generally been a freewheeling tournament, as are the CBI and CIT, and for years, guys have played these games over the total. But I don't know that this enhances the potential for points any. Therefore, the padding of the line and the extreme carry of that line by betting money, to me, it lends a little bit of an advantage to under players, and I think especially first half.
Well, Rob, I think that covers everything we had set out to cover on our NCAA tournament early look. There's a lot of games this weekend. Any final comments or thoughts other than to get to RobVinoSports.com before we wrap this one up?
Yeah, for those of you that want to get involved in the games, we have special March Madness tournament selection packages up and available, myself, Rob, yourself, and also Derek. So go ahead and phone in, get yourself set up. Games obviously start getting going in earnest tonight. All selections will be posted, so you want to get there. There's great information on the website as well. If you're looking for a little handicapping help, go ahead and find us, RobVinoSports.com.
Well, Rob, I enjoyed catching back up with you. It's been a little while since we've gotten to do one of these, and hopefully we can catch up next weekend and preview next week, midweek, and preview the Sweet 16 and Elite 8 games. For Rob Vino, I am Rob O'Connor. May all your picks be winning ones. RobVinoSports.com to help you out. Thanks for listening, guys.